I don't know if I'm live, tell you the truth. If I am, let me know. My monitor is completely blacked out on this side, thanks to YouTube or Google. So if you're out there listening, I do appreciate it. I'm back again. This time talking about, there it is, it's on, good. This time talking about what we just saw, the Mike Bobinski press conference. If you weren't able to tune in, I would suggest you go watch it if you are a Purdue fan and you care about what's happening or what's been happening the last few days, especially. Lot of bad information out there. A lot of incorrect things are being reported. A lot of things are being talked about on Twitter that aren't right. So I wanted to address some of that stuff right now. But before I do it, thanks to our sponsors, Homefield Apparel. Head to homefieldapparel.com. Get a sweatshirt shirt. Enter Boiled25 at checkout, or I think their sale is in its final day. Also, eatajs.com. Order ahead. Go to AJ's, though. It's better than eatajs.com because you get to see Adam in person. But I mean, that's it. You won't get to see him, honestly, much of the time because he's usually working. The dude busts his hump. So anyway, eat at AJ's. It's great. Burgers, beef, and beer. All right. So Mike Bobinski addressed the media. First time in a long time. Felt like a desert of information if you're like me and you're waiting for leadership and some concrete conversations from the horse's mouth of actually what was going on. I think he didn't address the media to give Walter room to do his job. I think that's the first thing. And he didn't want to become that guy that is out in front when it should be the coach's. It's the coach's rodeo, right? And he knew what was coming his way when he got in front of the media too. He knew what the questions would look like if he would have come out in even week 10, even week 8, right? It was already bad. The biggest takeaway that I took about that's quite a contrast to what has been reported is that the IU game was not the deciding factor. I think that's actually good news. We've heard a story recently. I think I talked about this in one of my recent casts about Jerry DiNardo was fired following the Purdue game because of the Purdue game. Like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that is not the case here. Bobinski hammered this idea. He said it 3 or 4 times that his search or this process, I guess is better, not his search. The process started weeks ago where he was looking at all the options and thinking about doing everything, which way he was going to go. But if IU wasn't the deciding factor, that means weeks ago it was decided. Here are some of my high points from the thing. And if you can compare and contrast many of these points to some of the reports that are out there, you can deduce your own conclusion about what you think is being reported. Many outlets have been wrong. And I think it's a hard job they've got because I think the Purdue Athletic Department, when things are bad, especially Bobinski's athletic department, is really good about staying quiet. And so if you hear information out there, you wonder, where did they get that information? That's the thing that I come to. I'm like, how did they hear this? And how is it so far off from what he's saying? Clearly, he wasn't leaking the story. So I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not a journalist. I don't claim to be a journalist. I'm just a fan who likes to talk about this stuff. And so I'm in a very different position. I react when I see things that I understand. Sometimes I try to connect dots that aren't connecting because I'm trying to figure it out just like you are. But I hope I haven't been irresponsible in this. Honestly, that's my biggest thing. I don't want to be viewed as irresponsible in this thing. In my personal life, I'm somebody who will react passionately to things sometimes to a fault. And I don't really want to do that because this is documented, it's recorded, it's streamed live. Once the words are out of my mouth, they're in the interwebs, and that is what it is. So I don't have the responsibility some of these people do. This is not my job. This is a hobby. Okay, so the second thing I saw was staff weakness was a major problem, and the lack of staff experience was a major problem. We all knew it. But for instance, he talked about the Graham Harrell episode when they decided to fire Harrell. They didn't have anybody really to step in that was capable of doing the job. And then that really exposed a a weakness on the staff. We already knew it, right? When he made the hire, when he decided to go in an experimental direction without putting up bumpers saying, hey, we need this, this, and this. Bobinski, that's a failure of Bobinski's. He didn't go quite as far enough to say, yeah, I failed there, but he did fail. And I will, I'll fully stand behind that statement that that was a Mike Bobinski failure, not a Ryan Walters failure. Again, when you hire a guy that young and you give him that much rope to go out and do his thing, there's going to be some mistakes made, but the mistakes were so colossal that they stung. They hurt Walters. They hurt the Purdue football program. They hurt Bobinski and how he had to handle this situation. Next up, he said the search firm that's going to hire Walters' replacement, they do background checks and bring candidates to him, but the final decisions, the interviews and all that, that's done by Bobinski, Chang, Grimes, and the trustees. They do the hiring. So that kind of clears up something that I think a lot of us wonder. A friend of mine asked me, why are they even using search firms? Well, I can understand why you almost have to have a search firm to get stuff done quickly. Those search firms, what they're doing is they're constantly researching and having conversations with people that are out there, that are interested in moving on and that might be interested in this job specifically. So you get kind of a hot lead or a warm lead when you get involved. I think those search firms also will do back channel communications. Like they'll reach out to agents. So they'll say, hey, will you field this call? Will this coach listen to us if we call him right now? And so those are really, really important links in the chain of making the hire, right? There's still so much nebulous information out there that we all, and I say me, I'm included on this, accept as fact. Because you say, I like this source, so I believe them. And this is a problem. By the way, this is a bigger problem. We could talk about this in the real world, away from the unimportance of sports. But when we believe a news organization and the information that they're receiving is flawed, that could be a problem. But the second part is, are they jumping the gun and reporting something as fact when they don't really know it's fact? Now, I don't know, but there's so many things. Like the one thing I said this to Anish and Justin yesterday, because when I read that leak story about Bobinski saying he wanted to keep Walters even after the IU loss, and it took Mung Chang to come in and say, no, we're making a change. I was blown away and angry. I'm going to be real honest. I said, that's really unacceptable. That shows that Bobinski doesn't know what he's doing. Well, it turns out that is not the story Bobinski's telling us. That's a wide difference of the story that what's telling us. So then the next question is, why was that reported? I mean, why did that come out? I don't understand. The next one is like the story. I don't know why I have it in my head. I can't even tell you where I read it, where I saw it, where I heard it. But why do I think that Helton from Western Kentucky didn't interview well at Purdue? I don't know the story. And part of that's by my bad memory. And again, I'm going to put this on me. I didn't make that story up, I don't think. So I put out my list of coaching candidates. It's on boiledsports.com right now, the old-fashioned website. But I put up my list and what I was thinking on my list. And Helton's on the list. And one of my negatives, I said, well, he was interviewed last time. It didn't go well. And that's kind of a damaged fruit type idea. But that might not be exactly true, right? We just know he didn't get hired. That's what we know. And we do know that Bobinski was absolutely wowed by Ryan Walters. And that's fine. That happens in interviews. I consider myself a pretty good interviewer when I talk to people about a job. If I get to the interview, I'm probably going to get the job offer. Okay. And so maybe that's what Walters is. Maybe he's as charming as I am, which isn't. Who is? But one thing that I took away, one of the things, if you look at my criteria for what the candidates I want to be talked to, okay, and that's just my opinion on our website. And I was very clear, these are the things that I think they need to do to hire a coach. One of the things that I said was I wanted an offense-first coach. And that comes from the successes that Purdue has had by head coaches generally are offense-first guys. And they create offenses that are innovative or fast-moving or something different that levels the playing field that you're always going to have versus, I'm not talking like Purdue can't compete with the Big Ten like many of the people on Twitter are like, oh, that's the talent's the problem. And I've said this over and over, talent's not the problem in my opinion. But I'm talking about with the truly elites in the conference, and I'm going to say Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Washington used to be up there. I'd say they're not there right now. I'm not talking about that middle group, because the middle group, I think you can shrink that gap and say, okay, Wisconsin's known for pounding the ball. Not anymore. And they've got massive linemen, but we're known for spreading the ball around. So we play a different game. We're known for speed. They're known for size, that sort of thing, right? But when you get up into the Michigan, Ohio State, specifically Ohio State and Oregon right now, okay, kind of a two-horse race. They're paying more than anybody for their talent. Not only are they bigger than you, but they're faster than you too. These guys are superhuman, right? And that's a problem some of you guys have with the idea, the concept that I joked about on Twitter, that if Ryan Day was fired in haste at Ohio State, Purdue hires Ryan Day, you're like, oh man, he can't even beat Michigan. Well, guess what? He's probably a pretty good coach because his resume is good, but he's not a candidate for me. Okay. It's not a serious one. There are a lot of guys out there that aren't serious candidates. Talked to somebody this morning about Ed Orgeron, right? Ed Orgeron, extremely entertaining guy. I mean, dang it. We'd have the most fun in press conferences. Like Danny Hope on steroids, just tons of entertainment, the things he says, the way he acts. But one thing Bobinski talked about, this is on my notes here, is he was hiring for, let's see, what did he say? I'm hiring for the long term. I'm hiring for a program being built, not just a quick, successful hire. That's a big deal, right? He also said he's very aware and they are very cognizant of the personnel issues that are at stake, meaning the NIL, the guys going to go that potentially are going to leave because they are enticed by NIL, the guys that are entering the portal, the guys being lost in recruiting. And he said an interesting thing. He said, everybody is still had their job in the offices other than Walters, meaning those people are all still employed for the time being. I think most of them leave, but he also said some left already. They said, okay, I'm going to go get another job, or I've got a lead on another job. Thanks for your whatever. I leave with him because I came with him, whatever. But he talked about the balance that he has to have and they have to have as an office as this flux of in and out happens, right? You have people flooding to the doors and you have people that are going to flood in. And right now you have the heading for the doors, people packing up, doing that stuff, getting ready to go, right? And a lot of people are probably upset, you know. He said everybody was very professional. Walters down was they were all very professional when they're notified they no longer had jobs. They probably knew it was coming, but that's good to hear. There was no like Jerry Maguire type moment of a dramatic exit. But that was good to hear. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, big thing for me. Big thing for me. And we didn't talk about this specifically a lot. We touched on it because we kept getting hit with the idea. Not a mention, not a squeak, not a hint, not a tip of the cap about any scandal or impropriety. Nothing there. To me, that says a lot, okay? And we don't know. What we do know is what Bobinski said. And so we all have the decision to make of who do we believe? What do we believe? This is always a question when we're ingesting information, stuff from the media, and even from the horse's mouth, the athletic director. How do we take it? What do we believe about that person? But he didn't mention it. And I don't think, I mean, there are politicians out there. Anybody in that sort of power is good at talking to the media, has some political skill. I don't think Bobinski's a liar, though. So at some point, I always say, you know, if someone is a liar, if they choose to be a liar in their personal life, it's not on me to not believe them until it's been proven. I don't have any reason not to believe Mike Bobinski. And if he wants to lie to fans about different details of this whole process, that's on him. It's not on me. So I'm choosing to believe what was told by me today, that I still like Mike Bobinski. I do not like the way the last 2 years have gone. Specifically, the last year has been horrible. And I'm glad the change was made. This is but this was a failure of the search firm, the people that were fooled or believed Ryan Walters' plan. If they would have believed it again, that would have been on them. That would have been on them. And it's on them. And Purdue's family is paying the price right now. Purdue's fans are paying the price right now in that everybody here. It's not like, I mean, this is our favorite diversion, right? I've been on this talking about it a lot because we had a nice holiday weekend where I could get on here and talk. But this is a diversion. This is something to distract you from real life. This is not real life itself, right? This is not, if you've had a sick parent, like many of my friends have had to struggle with this right now. If you've got, things that are more serious, it puts us all in perspective that this stuff's just silly. But it's fun. It's all fun, right? And a lot of you spend lots of money on it, so it's important. Where do you put your time, talent, and treasure is one of the things that I've always been taught. This is where it shows where your heart is, right? It's a biblical principle. But many of you are like me. You put a lot of time and you put a lot of money into this, and so it does matter. But it's still not the end-all, be-all that we make it sometimes as we're passionately arguing. I apologize to you guys if I've gotten too serious about it and you've seen me as a lunatic because of that. I do. I really apologize for that. I hope you understand that I'm somewhat grounded, but I also am someone who will have knee-jerk reactions. So, programming note, we are still having a Handsome Hour tonight, 9 p.m. Jay, Anish, and I are going to talk about all this stuff. We're going to react to this. We do have the BS search firm is up and running officially. I kicked that off with my post. I'm not sure how we're going to break this up. We've been talking about how we're going to put that out there, but we're definitely going to have breakdowns of each coach, the guys that interest us. My primary coaches that interest me are out there. They're on the site already, but we're going to also come and do video vignettes. We hope, if we have time, of each coach. That's our goal. So if we get there, it'd be great. If we don't be surprised. That happens a lot. We have a lot of good intention at Boiled Sports, and not all of it gets met. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit. Thank you for tuning in live. Big Time Boilers here again. Grant and I, we actually know each other and been talking on and off for months about this, right? But he says, imagine my shock. Smokescreen. Indeed it was. Yep. It was a smokescreen. We don't know exactly how that smokescreen was given, meaning how do these intentional leaks get out there, right? Is it someone they say, you didn't hear this from me, but, right? Or is it something that this is the deal? You go and you talk to this person, they give you information, and it's your job to report it. That's what I think. I think there's some marching orders given. Eric Cleveland says, Yanni transferring. No surprise that guys are starting to transfer. Here's the thing. A lot of people enter the pure portal. Will this next hire grab some of them out, right? Like the Dr. Pepper commercial. I love that commercial, by the way. It's hilarious. But yeah, no surprise Yanni's entering. I think he's the first of many. Kevin in Albuquerque says, popped over from watching Bobinski to get your reaction. Watching Bobinski. Yeah, I think one thing that Bobinski would not answer is the specific, the week he started thinking about this, looking at the process, that sort of thing. And I think I don't think he can answer that question. Yep, second week. Like if he says right after the Notre Dame game, like what I think should have done when you set that historically bad precedent, I think he had a bit of responsibility to start thinking about it, but he didn't admit to any date, and he can't. He can't do that. Big Time Boiler continues, leaning at retaining Walters and my ass. And I think that's the reference to what has been reported. And yeah, turns out that's false. Matt Hostetler says, saw a private jet from Georgia flew into Purdue this morning. Georgia. So this is where we're going to get, and this is the fun part of it, right? We're going to say some of you, just like Anish loves coaching searches, some of you love the private jet watching, which is fun, the tail numbers and all that stuff. And you guys know exactly what to look, and it's fun. But it's silly, right? Okay. So it's Georgia. It's probably Kirby Smart. I think it's the only thing. Probably Kirby Smart. Steve Azano says, listening in my headphones during lunch at work. Happy Monday from South Florida. Awesome, Steve. I assume since you're in South Florida, your office is on the beach. So enjoy the sunshine and the warm weather. I'm actually going to take a little mini vacation down in South Florida in a couple weeks. So my wife and I are having a getaway. So I'm excited to, maybe I'll see you. Meisterberger says, Hail Purdue. Andy Kotelnicki, that's the guy from Penn State. There's a lot of interesting things happening out there. If you go on these 5 Purdue candidates that 5 not can't miss Purdue candidates, 5 Purdue whatever. And all these sites are doing kind of what I did, which they're giving you who they think is a good fit for Purdue. Some of these outlets have no connection to Purdue. So some of these candidates are guys that I'm like, heck no, don't do that. I don't think Kolanecki, I don't know, I'm not saying that right. I've mispronounced almost every name I've said in the last few weeks. But yeah, he's offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator. Big dude, huggable. But I don't know. I guarantee you, based on what Bobinski was saying, he doesn't have the same criteria I do. He's not looking at just offensive minded guys with head coaching experience with at least 60% success rate. He's not. Other thing I found, this is interesting, me going through and just organizing my thoughts, because I had been keeping a living document where I was changing things in orders. When I really got in, I did the next level of research where I looked at some of the big stories of this person's career and that sort of thing. What I found is I couldn't in good conscience keep some of those guys as high as I did. And the big one was Chip Kelly. He plummeted in my final posting here. And the reason he plummeted is the success he's had in recent years isn't up to snuff, but that's part of the reason he'd be available, right? His time at UCLA was solid, but the first 2-3 years he was really in a rebuild, trying to teach these guys how to play offense. That's for being real honest. But he hasn't had any of the major successes that he had at Oregon. And the other thing, a lot of times when guys go to the NFL and they come back as, I don't want to say damaged goods, but they come back different. You know, there are very few Nick Sabans out there that come back and they just are incredibly good and just as good as they left. But who knows? Maybe Matt Rule will prove in the long run that he never can get back to the level he was before he went to the NFL. So that'll damage a guy, his experience. Big Time Bowl continues. The staff was so horrendous that there was no one to take over play calling after Harrell. No one on staff that could be an interim head coach. That's exactly right. And that put pressure on Bobinski, I think, specifically. I told you my feelings after some of those losses. I would have said, okay, heads roll. Every time you have something like this, there has to be accountability. Some of you guys don't believe in that principle, and that's okay, but I do. And so I'm like, okay, pretend I'm in Bobinski's shoes. I've had a business, I could say, well, there's got to be accountability in some way. The first one is you have a long conversation, tell them they're on notice, right? Warn them and say, you can get better, but you need to do it in a hurry, right? But the second thing is you don't let your words just be threats and don't let it just be words. And then you start having staff changes. Bobinski was in a horrible position because this staff could not do the job if Walters was fired. And I would argue Walters couldn't do the job while already on staff, as we found. So what do you lose at that point? Maybe you just have them do it by committee and they come together and they figure some things out. And at the end of the season, when they go, just like the Hazel time, right? Something is learned, like Gerard Parker, right? He's a head coach now at Troy. And part of that is he was given the interim role at Purdue for 6 games, 6 weeks. And he learned a lot. So Jason Ringer says, heard from Split Zone Duo podcast, the offensive coordinator search leak was Bobo going to Walters to give him a chance to see if he could go big game hunting for a name OC. But no one bit, and that was the final straw. That's an interesting theory. And I don't know the root of where these theories come from. There are a lot of people that have good sources. They talk to the right people. But there are a lot of conflicting good sources. Like other people say, yeah, I've got the source. I know this, right? So I think that's a good theory. I think a lot of this is theory. And then you go back after the case and you say, okay, was this really good? And even if it's something, here's the other thing. Even if it was good that time, the next time something like this rolls around, it might not be a good source anymore because they're not as in the know or whatever. So it's got to take everything with a little grain of salt. John Reiner says, why did they fire Harrell then? If nobody was capable to run the offense, to this day, I can't define the offense. Somebody had to be accountable because of the mentality of the fan base, in my opinion. I think that was a breaking point just to keep things somewhat calm and to keep I think there are a lot of things you're doing there. You're trying to calm down season ticket holders. You're trying to let them know, hey, we notice, we hear what you're saying. We've got our finger on the pulse. And you say that statistic failure And that failure that we see with our two eyes is just absolutely unacceptable. Something has to change. So I think they had to do it. But boy, did it expose everything. So was it Harrell's fault that Purdue's that bad? No. That's the thing you have to say in hindsight. Harrell's not a great offensive coordinator, but bigger problems were on that staff the whole time. Big Tom Boiler says that wasn't a good press conference for Golden Black. He continues, you're correct, Alan. Confirmed last night that Helton did not interview well. Okay. Heard he's a bit different. Maybe he's quirky. Maybe he's like me and he talks too much. Maybe he is like me and he's so handsome that it's off-putting to the interviewer. Maybe he's short like me and that's also off-putting. I don't know. I mean, like, if you're a weird guy, if you've got a big personality and you're talking to a guy, I think Bobinski is very buttoned up. And maybe if you're somebody who's like all energy, if you're Danny Hope, right? Bobinski never talked to Hope in the professional setting. But Danny Hope would have been hilarious, I think, in an interview, just because he's so enthusiastic and happy to be there. But then he has this edge. When he turns the corner, it's like, holy crap, this dude is nuts in like the best possible way. Who knows? But yeah, okay. So we have heard that. It can be confirmed. My brain's not just making things up. But there's a lot of that stuff rolling around my head. John Reiner says, this is not a long-term hiring environment. Purdue is now a stepping stone job with the Big Ten 3 to 5 year run. That's it. This is due to money game now built into the plan. So John, before you throw out all the ideas that Purdue can ever have long-term success, I would beg you, pump the brakes just for a second. Not because you're wrong about the current situation, but because we don't know how the new version of college football will look and how much stability will come from that. I think there's going to be so much change in the next 2 years with the way personnel is handled. I also think contracts are coming, like real contracts. They have to come. And when those come, and it's not just like, pew, 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 guys are just flying out of the program. I think when some of that stability is brought, maybe there's a 2 year something that they say, okay, every contract's going to be a minimum of 2 years or something. I don't know. They've got to do something. There has to be transparency. There has to be contracts. I've been screaming for that for years, but the first step is what we're seeing next year. So I would say, don't throw it all out yet. Don't start believe that Purdue is never going to be anything but a stepping stone, simply because if you find the right guy, and if you find the guy who loves where he is, there's a possibility that you're like, man, this guy, he knows he's home. What if you find Purdue's Matt Campbell? I mean, it's not impossible. It's not an impossibility. Campbell has been an excellent fit at Iowa State, and he's had schools come at him over and over and over. And I think even the NFL has come at him once or twice to try to woo him away, and he's stayed. That's a big deal, right? And this happens sometimes, it happens. So I'm not gonna rule it out. I'm not gonna go that negative. Sorry, but I would encourage you to just wait a year or two. Let's see what happens. Meisterberger says, handsome hour, kick ass. Yeah, it's coming. T. Thomas says, what's up, guys? Former player. Many of us don't like the direction Mike is going. Also felt the fire was needed. Thanks for coming on and sounding off. Appreciate this. We've got a pretty good amount of former players now telling us their opinion. I love hearing it. You guys, I appreciate what you guys did. I always say, and I don't know exactly who you are, so I could probably figure out if I thought about it a little bit. But I don't know what era you're from, I don't know which coach you played for, any of that. I don't know if I've ever met you. But one thing I will say is I always appreciate what you guys do for the university, because you, number one, you literally sweat and bled for the university. That's a huge deal to me. You guys are a lot tougher than me physically and mentally, but you also went to school. Many of you guys continued to get grades better than mine, and you were putting that much time into it. I really appreciate what you're talking about. Your perspective, though, is very different than ours. I can tell you that, than just the normal fan, especially the 5'4" fan that talks too much. But I appreciate it. I want to hear it. I want to hear more of it. And sometimes I agree with the perspective. Sometimes I say, I don't know if I can relate with that. But I do appreciate you coming here. Thanks a lot. John Reiner says, you fix this for next season. It's free agency every year now, coaches included. Yeah. So this is what I'd say. Wait, it has to get better. If it doesn't get better, A guy like me will not be a college fan soon. I went to a high school basketball game 2 days ago. My nephew plays. And so I went there and I'm like, there's something pure about being at a high school game and just being like, you're watching kids that are just playing because they want to play, right? You don't feel the undercurrent of business there. I mean, there's something awesome about being a big time place, being at a big time environment. Ross-Ade feels better than it used to, and it's going to get better still. I think they got the next level of improvements are coming probably to the concourse, which thank God they need it. Need a lot of improvements. Need improvements with how they handle traffic, but it's better, right? And there's something great about going. You're like, wow, okay, this place is cool, right? But there's also something great about going and watching kids be kids, play a game because it's a game, having fun. You know, they want to do it. I mean, my nephew got into the game the other day. He had 2 steals and he scored. First time he's ever done any of that in a high school game. It was awesome. Dude was lighting it up. So it's fun to see. Let's see. T. Thomas says, great show. Thanks for the content. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Region Boiler says, Bobinski kept saying 7 to 10 days until they hire someone. Yep. Makes me think it's going to be someone coaching in a conference championship. I think that's a fair connection to draw, but it's not necessarily the case. So I understand why we'd say, okay, these lines connect, but it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes processes take a little time, getting everybody on the same page, but it's not necessarily, it has to be a guy in a conference championship. My brother drew the exact same line, and I think it's understandable, but I don't think it's a guarantee. Reinert says, UCLA fans were happy to see Chip Kelly leave. He's negative from day one. He's a very uneven experience. He lost motivation. If you remember, though, and I did this, I went back and I looked at his first couple seasons. They were bad because they were coming from, what's his name? Son of another coach. I can't remember right now, but things were really dark. So he had a rebuild. He really did. And personnel had to change. He's kind of a curmudgeon at times too. And the older we get, the worse we get like that. So I understand it. Like I told you, he was a guy. The reason I love him, I love the idea of Chip Kelly because I'm like, man, you got a guy right there who is just an offensive genius. What he did at Oregon, the college football world had no idea how to handle it, right? And so it's still there. He's a good offensive thinker. What he did at Ohio State the other day, though, says, well, okay, right now he's not calling the ball. The game plan, the overarching game plan is Ryan Day's. And so he gives his marching orders to Chip Kelly, and Chip Kelly goes and executes. That did not look like a Chip Kelly offense, though. And if we're looking at that in itself, you'd say, okay, throw him out. He's not a candidate. So I get what everybody's coming from. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking. Meisterberger says, what is the Dowd family sentiment? Mom, dad, wife, LBD. Sentiment about what's going on. Well, it's funny. My daughter's in the other room, and I said, you want to go on? About to do a quick cast. And she said, no. My daughter doesn't care at all. TBD does not care about what's happening. And my wife is funny. She likes, so if a big story bubbles up, I'll read it to her or show it to her, and she'll laugh at it, or she's a Purdue alum. She and I watched games together when we were at Purdue, and both students, and we weren't engaged. We were just dating. And but LBD's a big diehard fan, and his perspective's a little bit different than mine. One thing, the Exponent put a cartoon out there. And my reaction to it, I think I told you guys, my reaction and LBD's were so different. But I think we're going to try to talk about that in the Handsome Hour tonight, maybe dig in a little deeper at that. But somebody asked me to do that on Twitter. I think it's a good idea, a good thing to talk about. Not that we won't have enough to talk about. We're going to have a lot to talk about. Metal Scholar 007 says, I don't think that Purdue must be a stepping stone for all coaches. I agree. But I think finding seasoned coach, mid-major or otherwise, that wants to prove they can build a winning culture in the Big Ten is key. You want to get the guy who says, you know what? I've done pretty well, but I never thought this was my final step, wherever they are. So if you look at Jason Candle, if you look at Ryan Silverfield, those 2 guys, if you look at Helton, those 3 guys, I think are all guys that I think they believe they can do more. And if they're anything like me in my career, and I say, man, I think if I were the director or the VP of that company in that role, if they have any of that ambition, this is a good place to say, yep, this is the place you go do it. And like Bobinski said, we're going to give you resources. The fan base is going to be excellent. You're going to come to a place where you're going to be well supported. I think he used the word well supported. So, yeah, I tend to agree. If you're Jason Candle, you've been there 9 years at Toledo, and you've done a lot. You've been very good, and you've created a very solid environment. Remember, he took over from Matt Campbell, which is really interesting. But Matt Campbell was very, very good at Toledo. I think he was, 11 or 12 wins a year for 2 or 3 years. But the thing is, he's solid there. He's probably got some pretty nice roots there, but he may say, I can do more. Where are these guys in their personal life? Are their kids grown, right? Is it time to do that? Remember, that was always something that everybody was worried about. Brahm had a young daughter. She was doing softball. She was traveling around. She had school stuff. The era of life matters to some of these guys, right? So that's another thing. Can you get another Joe Tiller? If you get another Joe Tiller, a guy who's 50-something years old, and he's like, yep, I want this to be my final stop. I know what I've got. I know I'm a good coach. I've got that confidence of an ex-player, right? But I want to go and I want to build something special. Something good can happen. T. Thomas is back, says Tiller last year began Danny Hope era. That's awesome. So you got to see Joe when he was, tell me, his attention to detail had changed. Let me just say, that's my perception. I had friends on the team who told me some stories about, I would love to talk to you in person sometime, about what Tiller was doing during practices, how recruiting went, off-field details, the things that he used to value, he didn't care about as much because he was older. And I always say, I think Tiller is a little bit older than my dad. And I always said, yeah, my dad coaching a major college football program at that point would have been funny, because my dad was like, I don't care. I'm pretty close to retirement. I'm feeling it. So yeah. So you played for him, and then you get to play for Hope, which, man, energy. That's the thing. I met him a couple times, and I was like, man, he was palpable. The dude had the best handshake I've ever had. I swear, bones broke in my hands. He's a beast. David Cogsher. Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's on my list, but he fell. And the big thing that I'm worried about with Mullen is it's been years now since he's coached. So building the staff is a little bit harder. He also, obviously, at Mississippi, he was awfully good, built an incredible program, built incredible offenses. Then at Florida, he was kind of run out, and he seems like a level-headed, nice dude. I think he'd be awesome in the press conferences. But yeah, he's definitely in my list. So I suggest if you guys are thinking about this stuff, go look at my list, not because mine's the end all be all, but maybe it'll make you think. And there's more coming. I don't know if Anish has turned on all the portal. We have a bunch of stuff that's ready to go. But there'll be more names on our site. So Nolan23 says, what if Helton doesn't interview well and is weird? Harbaugh is weird too. Harbaugh is very weird. The Harbaugh family is very weird. Tom Crean is in the Harbaugh family. I always say Thanksgiving and Christmas at that place must be just absolutely nuts because they're all psycho. I think their dad's a little weird too, but I don't know if it's a bad thing. Obviously, if you just want football wins, Harbaugh's pretty good. And what Harbaugh did at Stanford, that was pretty amazing. Golden Black mentioned David Shaw. I don't have him on my list, but David Shaw is a guy who won at Stanford in difficult conditions, high academic standards. But Stanford had a wrinkle, right? Remember, during COVID, their athletic director pretty much put a stake in the ground saying, we're not gonna go more deeply into the murky waters that are in college football. Ironically, now they're leading the way with Andrew Luck being their GM. So who knows? Maybe they've turned a page because they realize, man, it's kind of nice to have football seat revenue, have ticket revenue coming in because they need it. And I mean, they were shaken down by the conference realignment. Absolutely. No doubt. Nolan 23 says, would have been nice to hear Bobinski talk about returning our passing offense heritage, but I realized he didn't want to paint himself into a corner. Yep, I agree. I really wanted to hear that too, though. I'm with you. John Reiner says, I'm a curmudgeon. As I get older, I understand. I'm with you. Every day, I'm a little more curmudgeon-y. I think it's a word. Nolan23 says, the Exponent cartoon was in poor taste. Kicking a baby in the dumpster is wild. The whole thing's wild. I'm not going to go any deeper because I think it's a fun conversation. You can all have opinions on it, but it was wild. There's no question. John Reiner talks about, he says, good point about Tiller. He wasn't going anywhere. You're correct. Yeah, he was... What a perfect breath of fresh air. There's some people, it's funny, that are maybe a little younger than me. They don't remember when Tiller came in too well. And they don't give Tiller the credit that he deserves. It's incredible what he did. Absolutely incredible what he did. And the life that it breathed into the program and the school is so good. Like I remember first time I saw Vinny Sutherland, I think a team was coming on the field. Notre Dame was coming on the field. And I didn't know Sutherland. I didn't know who he was really, but he was just so freaking wild. He and linebacker, single digit, darn it. They were crazy. And Tiller let them be crazy. And he's like, all right, you guys are nuts. Go be nuts, right? Tiller allowed guys to be who they wanted to be, but then at the same time, he expected them to be part of the system and buy in. And so that mix, right, was so good. He was so good at finding the line of letting guys play and putting guys in the right place and moving people around, but he got them to buy in. Big deal. So let's see. Tony V says, hoping Bobinski's expectations are high. 111 worries me, and his plausible candidate gets his new job. 111 will not happen next year. And he mentioned the other thing, he said, this should never happen again at Purdue football. So his expectations are a lot higher than what we saw. 111 will not happen next year because the first two games they're not a test. So 2-10. I'm just kidding. That's not good. T. Thomas says, I'm an open book. Would love to discuss with you. Tiller was hilarious, and Danny was a firecracker. Yeah, we can talk about this sometime. Seriously. I don't know if you've ever been on here before. I don't remember seeing you, but it's great to see you. Let's try to talk at a game sometime or I don't care. If you're in Fishers, let's get lunch. I don't care. Danny Hensley says, got to make John Gruden say no. I can say I'm not. John Gruden is not on my list. I'm out. I'm out with John Gruden. But the way he went out, I'm out with Gruden. Everybody makes mistakes, but this seems like more than that to me. I think he'd win at Purdue, but I think there's some things you don't really want at your school. You don't want to be holding your nose as you cheer for a guy. And if he gets off the track and starts doing stupid stuff again, I don't think we want that. I think Purdue should have a higher standard, like a baseline that's higher than that. Nancy Williams says, Musa and Karlaftis have entered the portal. Yep, it's going to happen. Those are very good players. That stinks. And they're also good guys. So really stinks. Steve Azano says, please not David Shaw, as I am a Stanford fan. I love Stanford. Okay, let me just say that. My baseline, I love Stanford. I love the idea of Stanford. When my son was applying to schools, my son is academically strong enough that he could legitimately apply to Stanford and Ivy League schools and MIT. And I said, please apply to Stanford, and he wouldn't do it. So I don't think he wanted to go that far away. But I love Stanford. We went through Stanford's campus a couple summers ago. Didn't change my feelings. It's a great place. Great place. Academically ridiculous. Great place. Noam 23 says, I was at Purdue 2000 to 2005. I miss Joe Tiller. I do too. I miss a lot of that era. Jay Lizard says, Sutherland was nuts. I played a semi-pro with his teammate Javon Anderson, and he told me he was one of a kind. Yeah, Sutherland and I still go back and forth on Twitter. He's hilarious still. He's very funny dude. Very funny dude. A lot of big personalities. We're allowed to be big personalities on the team. Mike Rose is correct. Big time boiler. That is exactly what I was thinking of. That's another one of those big personalities, and he was a nut. He was crazy. And I'm thinking about another, Matt Mitrione. I mean, these guys, gosh, they were great. Meisterberger says, is that Tommy Thompson, or is that Tommy Thomas? He averaged 7.8 per catch. I hope that's who it is. I hope that's Tommy, because I remember when he came on. If that's you, Tommy, I remember you were like, you're a great water bug receiver, rangy, long arms, super enthusiastic. So if that's who it is, that's awesome. And good sleuthing there and good thinking. So that would make a lot of sense. It all matches up. Nolan 23 says, what do you think about Bobinski saying the Bucky game had zero impact on the decision? I'm glad about that. I hope that's the case. I'm glad about it. Because that decision should have been made. And remember what I said. I don't know if you guys remember this. I called Northwestern the Alamo Part 2 because the first one to me was Oregon State. They really need to win that game to have a decent season, meaning flirt with a bowl game, decent season. And the second one was Northwestern because I'm like, okay, guys, this is a bad team. It's a bad team. Got to beat bad teams. And turns out they were a bad team. Also, Wisconsin was a bad team, and they beat Purdue like yard dogs. Absolutely yard dogs. That was horrible. Metal Scholar 007 says, I agree. Someone the Tiller mold would be best. Experience, age, wanted a final school to retire at. Who on your list is most akin to Tiller, do you think? Well, Chip Kelly. I mean, Chip Kelly, his age, I think he's 60. Tiller was 50-something. Let me bring that up real quick. If I can look at it real quickly. If you look at age-wise, Mullen's getting up there. Monken was on my list. I don't think Monken's system would work in the Big Ten, his offensive system. Barry Odom. But the problem is these guys are not in the height. Tiller was in his height, right? Wyoming was really, really good. He was super inventive at Wyoming, right? Chip Kelly is not in his prime. I'm aware of this. So you want somebody who, like Lance Leipold is like that type of guy, but he's already gone to Kansas. Is the bloom off the rose because they're having a losing season? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But he didn't make my final cut. But that's the type of guy, So I looked at Vigan from Montana State. I know he's not that old, but he's a guy coming from the lower division where I think you could get guys that would be. I got one for you, and he's not on my list, but Brock Speck. If you want stability, if you want a guy that will love Purdue till he dies, I think he does. I think his rub comes from how he was treated and how he was kind of run out. And he wasn't given the opportunity to head coach then. I think Brock Speck could come and retire at Purdue, and he's not that old. He's not that old. He loves Purdue. He's not offensive minded, but I don't think it's the right guy. But he has succeeded as a head coach over and over and over again. I don't think he's the right guy. He's not my pick, but he could be that guy. If we're okay with that, I think the results would be like Danny Hope, but it'd be a different pathway of getting there, right? You'd have a very, very steady personality. You'd have a guy that loves what he does, loves the people around him. Maybe Thomas can tell us about this. Hey, Tommy, there it is. There's Tommy. Maybe he can tell us about a little bit about Brock Speck. No, he missed Brock Speck. Right, Tommy? I think you missed Brock Speck, if I'm thinking correctly, because he was already headed out. But yeah, that's a guy that would be there. He's not on my list, but he would be there. He'd be in that kill zone, if you will. Didn't mean that about the age. Okay. Jay Lizard says, good call on Gruden. We are in a vulnerable position, can afford high risk. He's not the right guy. It's my opinion. Everybody can have their own opinion. Everybody can disagree with me vehemently about my list. That's okay. Start the conversation. Let's talk. Will Thrasher says, do you think Purdue is overestimating how good a football job this is? No, I don't. Why would a Lashley from SMU leave? He has a much better NIL situation where he's at. I think Purdue's a very good situation. I think you're underestimating the power of Big Ten, the Big Ten Conference, and the perception of the Big Ten Conference. To be on the biggest stage all the time really matters to coaches. And to have the revenue that they have, that every Big Ten team has, the TV revenue that's built in. You don't have to sell tickets, and you still got a lot of money coming in, a lot. The SEC is right there too, but SEC doesn't have as much TV revenue. So they're close, they're right there. But I think Purdue fans specifically underestimate what we are. I think that's kind of it's a personality flaw. Okay? I think most Purdue fans underestimate what we are. We're important. We may not be the most successful program, but you're still part of the Big Ten. Look at the freaking people that pour into the stadium week after week this year. Look at that. That's a sleeping giant. Tons of people came in there, passionately wanting to see Purdue win. And not with absurdly dumb standards like you see at some other schools. Just want to be in there with your friends, watching a good product. What more could a coach want than that, right? I don't think Purdue fans turned too quickly. I think Purdue fans were somewhat measured. There's some out there. There's some outliers. But we gave Walters a chance to right the ship, and he couldn't. But then also logical enough to say, time to pull the plug. And is it early? Sure, 2 years early, but it was late too. They could have done it in the middle of this season easily. So let's see. Dustin Blythe says, I think Rodriguez deserves a look. I do not like Rodriguez. Jim Mora is who you're thinking of at UCLA. Yep, that's good. Jim Mora does not deserve a look, in my opinion, because he has not been successful at college. His last stop sucked. I don't want anybody whose last stop sucked. I don't care who it is. There are too many good coaches out there that have had really good careers that aren't getting a look right now. I'd rather have a very, very, very successful coach from a lesser program than a coach who got kicked out of the door. And so that's why guys like, what's his name? Mullen, right? That has to come into the process. For me, it does. But Rich Rodriguez, if you don't know the story about what happened with infidelity on the sideline at Arizona, look it up. It's horrible. In my opinion, I am so bothered by that type of thing. So bothered by it. I think it's awful. So that's a low character dude. Oh yeah. My daughter just brought me a snack. She's been baking. It smells ridiculous here. Okay. Willie Thrasher says, every coach worth their salt is asking primarily about NIL infrastructure. Worried Purdue is such a severe disadvantage and they will struggle to get good candidates. Okay, Will. Now, I don't know where you felt in the summer. I don't remember a Purdue fan complaining about the boost that Purdue had given itself in the NIL and the collective. I don't remember one Purdue fan complaining. I really don't. Because there had been a big push and they went out and they got some guys that the coach said, these are the guys I want. And then he went and got them. And guess what? The recruiting magazines agreed. Purdue was ranked high on who they got from the portal, right? They paid the guys that were supposed to come in. Now, did it pay off? No, those guys did not turn out to be the impact players that we hoped for. But how quickly our perspective changes based on what we perceive, right? You perceive Purdue doesn't have any talent because they were so bad on field and they got beaten so badly. Tommy will tell you there are a lot of good players on bad teams, a lot of good athletes on bad teams. So, yeah, there are a lot of good players, a lot of good athletes on this Purdue team, and the NIL was not the problem. Purdue is not at the top of the conference, absolutely not. But who is? You've got an elite group of asinine fans, and I mean that. When you have people that their number one priority in life is to fund these players to get $1 billion, give me a break. You're ever creating a 25, 27, $30 million payroll at Ohio State and Oregon. Okay, number one, Uncle Phil Knight is a different bird. You've got a completely different thing. If you've got oil money like Texas A&M or even down further south at some places, fine. And then you've got places in the deep south where this is what they do. This is religion. Nothing else matters but dumping money into that football program. I can tell you, I do not agree with that philosophy at all. Give your money to a church. Give your money to somebody who's poor. You don't need to do that. And I fine. If that makes me a bad fan, I don't give a shit. So sorry. And if people perceive Purdue as bad in the NIL, that's fine. That's okay. I just don't agree with that because I didn't in the summer. There was not an indicator of that. This has bubbled to the surface as Purdue's looked worse and worse. Okay. Tony V says Tiller is 61, was 61. Tiller just passed away. Tiller was he 61 when he was hired? Is that what you're saying? I thought he was like 58. The reason I thought he was 58, I think Daryl Hazel was 58 or 56 when he was hired too. I think that's right. So if Tiller was 61 and he was there for 9 or 11 years, right? Yeah, I think that could be right. So I don't know. I don't have notes in front of me, and I'm awful at that. Off my cuff. Nolan 23 says Lance Leopold fits the mold. Final stop. Wise coach. They should call him. And I put him on my list and took him off a couple times because I was like, man, I think Kansas just put him on an extension. So my guess is buyout is someplace from 5 to 10 million. Maybe it's 4 to 5, just based on everybody else, the research. And then you have to pay him what? 5 to 6. So you're getting into pretty big money. Is Purdue ready to swallow that? I think Leopold's worth that. So I agree with you. Yeah. So, Tommy Thomas says it is him. So appreciate that again. So he down here says, no, I had Coach Spack and loved him. Thank you, Tommy, for sounding off. This is the time. I mean, here's the thing. I think I talked to Coach Spack. I think he was like super nice, normal guy. Like that's the vibe I got from him, but I didn't play for him. And everything that I've gotten from, like, I've seen videos of him like talking to his players at Illinois State. And I mean, he's a super likable guy, like super approachable. I think he's a player's coach too. He you can tell me if I'm wrong, Tommy, but he kind of bridges that thing where he gets respect because he can chew on you and he has a temper, but he also, I think he legitimately cares for the guys he coaches. And I think they feel that there's a genuineness there, and that really matters, right? So you really want that. Gus Malzahn is a name that's going around. He left UCF. He's now going to coach for one of his old coaches, right? So, Tommy V says, I mean, Kelly is 61. Okay, so there you go. A little bit older, but he's in that position in life. Thank you for the clarification. Sorry, I wrestled with that. Tommy V also says Cignetti is 65. Yeah, and this is the problem. I thought Cignetti was 63, 64. But that's one reason I thought if they didn't tie him down, he would get plucked, because I think he's a very ambitious dude, Cignetti. Very ambitious guy. So I think if the right job would have come and tried to pluck Cignetti, he would have gone. So, but I think they got him tied down. I think he'll retire there, but it won't be very long. It could be 5 years, right? And he's done. Nolan23 says Kansas has some good wins this season. Yeah, they do. That's the thing. They're almost like a Jeff Brom team this year. One of Brom's worst teams, right? Where he would get them up for big games, but they've also wet the bed a couple times. They're just not that good of a team this year. And that happens. Winning at Kansas is really hard. I mean, really hard. That's Kansas and IU, are 1 and 2 or something like that of the losingest football programs, I think, in NCAA history. So, of the FBS, right? So, Jay Lizard says, how much confidence do you have in Bobinski? Was it cray that he let Walters cut his OC and take over the offense? Did Walters totally play Bobinski and expose him as a b-ball, not a football guy? Okay, so in my research over the past couple of days, I did a couple of things about Bobinski because I understand why people have lost faith in Bobinski. If you go back, you look at Bobinski's stops. He was at was it Kent State or someplace like that first, a MAC school, and they had over and over 1 to 3 win seasons, and he didn't do anything about it. He let it happen. And so that was his first stop as AD, but it's a hard place with not many resources. Maybe he couldn't go hire a coach, but that's not good. Then he was at Xavier. It didn't have a football program at all, right? Then he was at Georgia Tech, and he had Paul Johnson as his coach. Paul Johnson was awesome at that point, right? Guaranteed, 8 to 9 wins a season, 6 to 8 wins anyway. But he was solid. And Georgia Tech had fallen off from where they were in the 70s. Obviously, they weren't, a national title contender or anything like that. But Paul Johnson was just what the doctor ordered for that program. He didn't have to do anything there. So he came to Purdue, and right away he inherits Darrell Hazel, and he has to make a decision. I think Morgan Burke left that gift for him, just like he was planning on leaving for the next AD, I believe. I don't think he wanted to do this, right? But he comes in, he has to make the decision, calls the decision, he says, all right, Darrell, you're out. Brings in Jeff Brom. And I think he and Mike Bobinski and whoever else made that decision, that was awesome. That was one of the hot names in college football. Great hire. And that built so much goodwill up with Purdue fans. But you might be right that football's not exactly his strength. Both of these things can exist, that he made a great hire. And at the same time, that revived Purdue football and was absolutely essential. Absolutely. But he is a basketball guy. And he's done a great job with facilities, and This hire is absolutely make or break for his legacy, though. There's no doubt. Let's see. Nolan23 says, thanks for sharing the insights, Dowd. Appreciate this content this weekend. Yeah, it's been a lot, and I appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate everybody meeting here. That's the thing. This has meant a lot to me. So it's good to vent. FJS says, Tim Polasek from North Dakota State. Good coach. I don't know enough about everybody, but that's one of them I don't know. One thing about North Dakota State, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think they've had a line of really good coaches, right? So you take over a program that already has all the parts in place and the culture. And so it's a little simpler. Like I talked about this in my post, that I was looking for guys that had maybe gone through a rebuild or dealt with tough situations, like Shaw at Stanford, dealing with tough situations because of the academic thing. Matt Campbell dealing with a tough situation because of the location, and you're surrounded by, you're going to get plucked. Your recruits, they're going to go to Oklahoma, right? They're going to go to Texas. They're going to go to Nebraska. So Campbell deals with some difficult things too, because Iowa State is kind of like Purdue in that you've got a big ag school, you got engineering, I believe, you got some level-headed students, you've got level-headed donors. You got place out in the middle of nowhere. Purdue's not exactly that, but they're competing against very big dogs. So that's why I think those type of coaches where I lean. Is it a tough thing to jump from FCS up to FBS because of all the NIL stuff? Yeah, really tough. But that doesn't mean somebody should be ruled out. Fairweather Greg McManus, one of my favorite dudes, says, late to the stream, listening to all the opinion and options. I know you've got some good thoughts too. Appreciate them. You're welcome to jump in at any time. John Reiner says, how does the Big Ten not go back to divisions? What's the downside if they did? I don't know. They need to go back to divisions, don't they? Especially for logistics, right? If you have the Western teams, make it easier on the travel of the West Coast teams. So you know, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, and then the Pac-12 teams. I think it makes a lot of sense. The thing that's we've all been duped. I hope you guys realize that we've all been duped because many people just love the conference championships. They suck now. They're stupid. Right? It's an extra game to give a chance for a team to lose and not get in the playoff. It's so dumb. It's all made for TV. Just like the conference tournaments in basketball. How many times does that conference tournament actually help a team get in? More than not, it hurts you, or it means nothing like it does for Purdue most of the time. But we've been duped. This is all made for TV stuff. They should get rid of all of it, in my opinion. Especially you've already got a long enough season, or make that conference championship the first round of the tournament. That's the other thing. That would make a lot of sense, right? So instead of, like you say, okay, we've got large bids. There are teams that don't make the championship, but then the championship, they get some leverage, like maybe they get a better location the next game, or they get a bye week after that, but they're playing into the bye week. I don't know. I think that's what they say. What the top 4 rated conference champions get the bye. So they're kind of doing that, but I think it's dumb too, because there are many teams in these conference championships that can play themselves out of the playoff. So it's not quite right. System's not quite right, but Big Ten going back to divisions makes too much sense. That's probably why they won't do it. Metal Scholar 007 says, agreed, the Big Ten, SEC have become the big leagues of college football. Big Ten head coaching jobs only become more coveted as time goes on, even as perceived underperforming Big Ten schools. Yeah, I think that's where we are in the state of the game, and I think it matters. And Purdue is right in the place they need to be, especially right in the place they need to be after that season, because man, they've got some work to do. John Ryder says, I did see how Polasek does the FCS tournament this month. I see how he does in it. But I love anything related to North Dakota State. Yep, they're successful. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think I'm not. That North Dakota State has had multiple coaches in a row that have been very good. I think their infrastructure is really, really good. So Jay Lizard said Jeff Foxworthy is coming to Fishers to perform at the Hamilton Southeastern Education Foundation Legacy Celebration. Is he going to be at the new basketball arena or whatever, the multi-facility? It's going to be nice. So I bet he is. That's a big house. So Jay Lizard says, thank you for answering my questions. Spoiled Sports, no problem. Tommy's back. He says, yes, send me a link where we can talk whenever. Hey, Tommy, if you're on, and I don't think I've interacted with you on Twitter, number one, you could email and I'll get it. You could email me at boilerdout@gmail.com if you want to. So that's an easy one. Boilerdout@gmail. And if that doesn't work, you can DM me on Twitter. I'm the one who runs the Boiled Sports Twitter most of the time. So those are real simple ways. So love to talk to you. Appreciate you coming on again. Jay Lizard says, one thing I found intriguing about Hazel is that he recruited former NFLers and assistants. Would you go more former NFL or high school coaches from good programs? One more thing I found intriguing about Hazel is he recruited former NFLers as assistants. Yeah, and so that's why his coaching tree is so good, right? Because he went and he got these guys with deep resumes, but he didn't get guys that he worked well with, right? They didn't have chemistry. I want a coach to bring his staff. That's what I want. So I don't really want a coach to have to build a staff. And that's why I'm saying I'm going away from coordinators, that business model. I know it can work. Don't get me wrong. I know it can work. But at Purdue, if you look at what has worked, let's just look at recent success. Let's just do that. Okay. Joe Tiller brought his staff. Jeff Brom brought his staff. Seems like it's pretty clear. Signetti down at IU brought his staff. You hit the ground running, and you can bring some of your players from your program. That's the other thing if you're an active coach. So you go on. Terry Camel says, is this still live? Yes, Tarek is still live. It is Monday, December 2nd at 12:46 p.m. I'm almost done. And Greg Johnson says, no, it's Memorex. That's a good old guy reference. I love it. Tarek says, imagine if we hired Coach Prime before Colorado got him. He's off to the Cowboys next. Yeah, this is the thing. A lot of people ask this question about cultural fit. I don't know. I wouldn't have thought Prime would have worked at Colorado either. I wouldn't have thought he would have been a cultural fit there just because he's so flashy, right? And he says exactly whatever the hell he feels like saying because he can, right? He's already worth $1 billion, I would think, and he doesn't need to soft sell anything, right? But I mean, this is one thing I heard people tell me that Ryan Walters was never a cultural fit because, like him, doing the bob in his head and, he's a cooler coach. Purdue had never had a cool coach. Purdue, Joe Tiller's not a cool guy. He was not a cool guy. We talked about Brock Spack, not a cool guy. Danny Hope was not a cool guy. Obviously, Jeff Braun was not a cool guy, and he didn't try to be a cool guy. Matt Painter's not a cool guy. Matt Painter's a great guy. He's a funny guy. He's an interesting guy, but I don't think he'd say that's a cool guy. You'd say, I want to sit around, have a brew, and smoke some meats with Matt Painter, and then enjoy the meats and have Matt tell you about what he seasoned them with because he knows his stuff. But he's not like a cool cultural guy, right? He's a cool, down to earth, I like this dude guy, right? Good hang, like Anish always says. So, John Reinert says they just had an assembly line of long-term NDSU champion coaches. Yeah. They just keep dropping them in. Their last head coach is at USC. Yeah. That's got to be taken into account a little bit, right? So I'm not saying you rule it out, but NDSU just wins. So good conversation today, everybody. I'm over an hour again. I blame you guys in the best possible way. Tommy, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate that. And thanks to the cast of literally dozens of us. Ted Berkey's here. He says, I'm late. Listen to the press conference, going back to the start. Hopefully they hire the right guy. Yeah, you'll listen. You'll hear. Make your call. Leave what you think in the comments. You're here all the time. People want to hear what you have to say. So, yeah. So thanks to everybody. We're going to be here tonight again. I've got work to do. I actually do have a job. It's just, as a contractor right now, I have some time where I'm designing product on a contract basis. I've got some flexibility. So that's really a blessing right now. God bless you guys. Hammer down. Talk to you tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time-ish. We'll see what's happening. Let's enjoy the ride. Late.